study on the values and attitudes of 5 groups of foreign language speakers in Finland. I'm going to tell you a bit about how what was our research design, what kind of questions we had here, and also some of the challenges that we had during the process. This was a collaboration between the cities of Helsinki, Espoo, and Vantaa, which are the biggest cities in the capital area, metropolitan area in Finland. Ministry of Justice was part of it, also Finnish Cultural Foundation, and E2 Research, where I'm from. We are this small independent research unit operating in Helsinki. And we basically wrote these 2 reports that were published last autumn together with Pasi Saukkonen, who is a researcher from the city of Helsinki, whom you may know. He's been attending these meetings, and my colleague from E2, Jussi Vestinen. This was in many ways rather unique survey made in Finland. In Finland, as well as in other Nordic countries, we have these rather extensive register data. We know about the demographics, and we know about the mother tongue and employment situation of the residents in Finland. But we don't do censuses, so we have basically no knowledge about the values and attitudes of migrants living in Finland. So this was the first time, at least in this scope, that this was done in Finland. So we covered many areas. We had some questions about integration, about social networks, identities, values and attitudes, and trust. And we also, when we analyzed the data, we used kind of socio-demographic background variables, country of origin, years lived in Finland, reasons for immigration, language skills, and so on and so on. The groups that we studied were Russian, Estonian, English, Arabic, and Somali speakers living in the Helsinki metropolitan area. These are basically the biggest foreign language speaker groups in Finland. As you can see on the figure on the right, Russian are by far the biggest group, Estonian next, then Arabic, Somali, English speakers. With English speakers, we only concentrated, or our sample only consisted English speakers from Western countries, basically from UK, US, Ireland, some from Canada and Australia. So we kind of wanted to keep this as a comparison group that was rather culturally coherent. So that was kind of, we could compare this group with the other language groups. All the respondents had lived in Finland for 2 years or longer. And our sample was a bit over 1,500, and we got approximately 300 interviews from each language groups. And it was a representative sample. We got this, first we took this sample of 3,000 from the official registry. I don't know what is the actual word that we use in Finland. And then we gave this to the company that collected us the data, and we made sure that the sample was kind of demographically accurate within each of these groups. Here's something about the implementation of the study. First, we started designing the survey questions with experts from the member organizations. We did this during spring 2018. Then we did this pilot study where we kind of wanted to test the questions with each target group in order to find out whether our questions are understood correctly, and also we had translated all the questionnaires to their native languages, so we wanted to make sure that the translations were accurate. and many kind of modifications were made during this pilot study. The field work and the interviews were made by market research company Taloustutkimus, which is one of the two of the biggest companies doing this kind of research in Finland. They basically recruited and trained the interviewers. They often were natively speaking these languages, and they did face-to-face interviews during the time period you can see there. And finally, when we got to analyzing, when we got the data, we also wanted to get feedback from the minority group, so we used ETNO, which is Advisory Board for Ethnic Relations in the Ministry of Justice, so we got feedback of the results from them before we came out with the results last autumn. As I told you in the beginning, this was kind of extensive survey, and I don't have the time to be too thorough. I just kind of want to highlight a few of our findings, and in the end, if you're interested, I can tell you more perhaps on a coffee break or something, or show you the whole questionnaire, but here are just few examples. This was one interesting comparison we had in the survey. We asked all the respondents, do they have Finnish friends or acquaintances in Finland, and Finnish here was understood as kind of native Finns or so. And as you can see here, English speakers, most of them had more than 5 friends in total, whereas especially Somali and Arabic speakers, many of them had basically none Finnish friends whatsoever. So this is kind of, the whole data was kind of gathered for the use of the cities, and they found this extremely interesting when they're thinking about integrating these groups to society. The results of Arabic speakers is understandable, since they came to Finland after 2015 and they've been living in Finland for a rather short period of time. But the Somali speakers were a kind of interesting case, since they're one of the oldest migrant groups in Finland, yet many of them still didn't have any Finnish friends. So this is something the city's been kind of thinking about. We can get back to this as well. Then we had one question about their intentions of staying in Finland for the rest of their lives. Here you can see also some interesting differences. Arabic speakers are most certain of their intentions. They almost all want to stay, at least quite possibly, which is understandable, since they have arrived to Finland as refugees. Whereas Estonian are kind of the opposite example. They basically come to Finland to work. They don't feel themselves as Finnish. They are not that attached to Finnish society, even though they are culturally rather close to native Finns, and even our languages resemble each other. So this is just one example. And then finally we had also the trust questionnaire. We asked about different social institutions, but we also had the classical question whether they trust people in general on a scale from 1 to 10. And there are obviously many interesting results here, but I'd like to point out one, what we kind of thought was interesting, that Russian, Estonian, English, and Arabic speakers, they considered native Finns to be more trustworthy, or their levels of trust were higher than the people who live in Finland and originate from the same country as they or their family. So this was kind of interesting, whereas the Somali speakers were the only group who trusted their own countrymen or women more than native Finns. So finally, about the challenges, we had obviously many of them had to do with the language barriers. Also, many of the Arabic speakers, they have been in Finland for only a few years, and as coming to Finland as refugees, they might kind of, they didn't have the culture of taking surveys, and they were the hardest group to get to take the interviews. Kind of, when operating with languages such as Arabic language and Somali, it was extremely difficult to make sure that all the translations were correct. We did the pilot study where we kind of tried to make sure that everything was in order, yet even though we did this, when we were publicizing the results, we kind of got to know that some of the terms used in the questionnaire proved to be problematic. For example, in Somali language, it turned out there is no word for identity, and we had this one set of questions where we wanted to know, we gave them categories, and we wanted to know how important they considered them to be from their point of view. And also, one interesting thing was that some of the Somali respondents took the survey in Finnish, even though when asked, they said that their Finnish language skills were on beginner level. This was not a large group of people, but yet it was surprising why they did this. We kind of figured that they probably learn and know about Finnish society in Finnish, so they, I don't know, thought that it might be easier to do this in Finnish, but this is puzzling. And also, the respondents from different language groups used scales differently. Unfortunately, these labels here are in Finnish, but these are basically the identity scales. There are different categories, and the respondents got to kind of evaluate how important these categories are to their identities. And as you can see, English speakers and Somali speakers use the scale totally differently. We had similar issues with one other set of questions, and usually it was Somali speakers and Arabic speakers that used the scale a bit in a different fashion than English, Russian, Estonian, and also Finnish and Swedish speakers. So this is something we need to keep in mind, and which is something everyone should keep in mind when doing research with people from different cultures with different backgrounds. That's everything from me. Thank you.